Good morning, everybody. Coach Mike with Eric Tillich, who is the president and CEO of the Wisconsin Conservatory of Music. And good morning, Eric. Thanks for being on the show with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. It's great to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, we have a son who's a music teacher, so I love talking to people in the arts and can't wait to hear a little bit more about you. So let's
Yeah.
start with a bit of your personal story.
Yeah. I'm a Milwaukee native. I grew up in the Sherman Park area, lived there my entire life. Went off to UW-Madison, got my degree there. Worked in politics for a little while and then found my niche in nonprofit work. So I've spent a majority of my career in nonprofit work, 25 plus years there. So get a lot of satisfaction in doing that. I always tell people I could be selling widgets and probably be very successful at it, but my heart is really working with nonprofits. Yeah, so I have a wife that we just celebrated our 31st anniversary. Yeah,
Congratulations.
thanks. We were out to dinner last night. We got married when we were 14. No, I'm kidding.
I'm like, wait, you said you grew up in Wisconsin.
Right. But and I have two children, both adult age, who are living, one in Wisconsin, one out of state in Minnesota.
Great. So, how did you get to be the president and CEO of the Wisconsin Conservatory of Music? Like, what was your journey to get here?
Yeah. I've been a fundraiser in nonprofits for pretty much my entire career. This is my first foray into running a nonprofit as president and CEO. But that's really where I cut my teeth, was in fundraising. And as you know, I mean, you interview a lot of people, and I'm sure you dig into nonprofits. I mean, fundraising is a key component to driving
Sure.
the engine, so to speak. So I think just my success over the years in raising money and working with donors and being able to move the needle in organizations, on at least on that front, set me up nicely to come into this role. I was the VP for development at a couple large nonprofits here in town, Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra for 6 years, and then
Nice.
I worked at the Boys and Girls Clubs for 2.5 years under Jim Clark. So I really just cut my teeth there.
Yeah, we actually one of my favorite clients, personal clients, is a guy that runs a organization called Rescuing Leftover Cuisine in New York City.
Oh, okay.
And he's young, like 28 years old,
Yeah,
but grew up food insecure. And so he started this organization, and learning how to fundraise was one of the most interesting things to kind of get him through, because sometimes the nonprofit mind is, well, we're nonprofit, and we're like, well, you got to have money to accomplish your vision. So
right.
if your
No
vision's
doubt.
big, your money needs to be big too. So
Yeah, I mean, part of this, Mike, I mean, I didn't really dive into this. I don't know if this is going to be an upcoming question, but when I took over the organization, no one wanted the job pretty much. It was about $1 million in debt, and the budget was about $1.5 million. So the debt to income ratio was just abhorrent. And I mean, to your point, one of the things I learned, through my master's degree was, how how to do business and how to run successful
sure.
businesses. So I utilized that training somewhat and kind of put it into the practice of the conservatory. So I know we're probably going to get into this and we might talk a little more in detail, but fast forward, I mean, this is my 8th year. We've had, 7 balanced budgets. We've grown the organization, at least 3.5 times where it was before, and we're serving a whole bunch of new people. So it's just a matter of, kind of taking, to your point, that approach.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about that. The target market, demographics, what's your mission? Who do you
Yeah.
serve?
So we're the largest community music school in Wisconsin, and we have an odd name because we have the conservatory name tag. buried into to our name, and we're really not a conservatory. I mean, in the 80s and prior to that, it was an accredited degree granting institution. So that name really made sense.
Sure.
There's just I mean, Milwaukee. I mean, there's just a lot of history and a lot of people that, will lean into things that have been the same for a long period of
Sure.
time, and so we always have to kind of well, we're trying to rebrand ourselves and kind of have people in the general community understand that we're a community music school, which essentially means we educate anybody in any instrument and vocal across the spectrum, all ages, from 6 months old to 96 years old, and that is one of our revenue streams, is the private lesson side of the house. The other piece of our business model is really trying to get working with community organizations and providing music education in their space. So we work in charter choice schools, we work in MPS, we work in nonprofits like Next Door Foundation, La Casa. So really, those entities are clamoring for our expertise in music education. And with respect to the elementary, secondary, and high school venues, those are all DPI accredited coursework that we're providing to students. So we're filling a need because having a son that is a music educator, there's just not a lot of them. So we are constantly the door is being knocked on to say, hey, can you help us fill this need? So those two components, and then the final one is the fundraising component, really drive the revenue engine at the conservatory.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how big cities are also interconnected, because Luis Ayala from La Casa was one of our interviews 3 weeks ago.
Oh, that's interesting.
Super interesting.
Yeah, we do their early childhood music education. They're our Smart Start program.
Yeah.
Along and at Next Door. Yeah, that is funny. Yeah, we're all interconnected. You got to be on your toes in Milwaukee, because you're going to run into somebody that you know or are working with. So
yeah, I love that. So how would you describe your leadership style?
yeah, I mean, I come to the table with the just looking at it from you've heard this before. I just don't like micromanaging people. I feel like you hire people who are professionals, who know how to do their job, and you give them a roadmap and goals to achieve, and let them at it. And my role, I feel like, similar to kind of maybe what you do in your work, is to coach them to be the best they can be in their professional acumen. And I have found that over the years, that approach has worked for me far better than the other approach, which is more the hammer approach. And part of it is the culture of nonprofits. I mean, it
Right.
tends to be more collegial and working towards a mission goal. But I mean, my mentor was the opposite of what I am. So, and it's interesting because I think you learn, what to do and what not to do in managing people in organizations. Right. And although he was really good on, a variety of different things that I learned a lot from him on, I definitively knew that I wasn't going to be that type of management style. So, a funny aside and story, maybe it's not funny, but he was this guy that his name was Don Cahill. He worked at Kellogg and then became the vice president of development at Marian University, and he hired me as his right-hand person. And two kind of interesting, I think, are funny stories. So the first 2 weeks I was there, he commuted back and forth from Chicago, and he calls me up and he starts yelling at me on the phone like, "I want this done and this done. I have 3 things for you," he says. And he only got through 2 of them, and he hung up. And I called him back and I go, "Don, what's the third thing?" And I think from that point on, it was kind of like, I'm not I'm not doing this. You can yell all you want, but I'm just
Yeah.
going to call you back in a professional way and figure it out. And the other thing that was funny is that someone on the faculty really like laid into one of my staff members about something, and I called them up and I had a meltdown with them. And Don caught wind of it. And he called me up and he goes, "Don't be me."
Yeah.
So he's like, it doesn't suit you, Eric. You're not that person. So from that point on, I just know. I mean, my way of working with people and dealing with people is I am pretty even keel. I don't raise my voice. It just doesn't. It doesn't. It's not my personality type. So anyway, a
Yeah.
long answer to a short question, but that's
No,
kind of where I land.
I think it's interesting because we work with people on both sides of that coin. I used to be the grumpy guy when I had a traditional job way back when, and
Yeah.
to the point I had to tell people, I'm like, hey, this is what I look like when I'm happy, because it was always thinking. I was a executive in a plastics manufacturing company, and every time somebody said something, I'm like, how does that fit our mission? Like, what are
Right.
we actually on track? And what for me was just nonstop working on the gears. Everybody interpreted it as, man, you must be mad all the time. And I'm like, I'm not mad at all. Like,
Right. I'm
super grateful that
focused.
you guys
Yeah.
just, threw this idea that we can.
Yeah.
So I think where we've landed is authenticity is best. So if
I
you're,
agree.
right, if you lead the way that you believe leadership works, and either style, like I coach some people who are pretty, pretty much yellers.
Yeah.
And we've had to get them to the spot of you can do that, but you got to apologize right off the bat. And eventually
Right.
they're like, yeah, I should stop. I should just stop doing that and probably not yell. So
Yeah, I mean the other thing I mean on that point is like, for me, if I like even have a touch of raising my voice, they know that something is not right,
yeah,
and it tends to be that way. So that's a good coaching tip though too. I mean, you definitively have to come back and kind of say mea culpa,
yeah,
I didn't
yeah,
mean to get that upset about it. But on the other point, Mike, is like it shows that you care. I mean, it's not like you're, I mean, part of it is like with that type of personality and leadership style, it's not like you don't like people, it's you care
right,
about the product and the mission. So you can certainly
right.
see why that could be a leadership style too. So I get it.
Yeah. I mean, we just want people to get the result. Like one of our core tenets is true communication is the response you get. So you can yell at somebody if you're getting what you think you need to get out of that.
Right.
But remember that there's also an emotional, you know, bank account. And every time you yell, you're making a withdrawal, and it's about 100 to 1 if you want to
Right.
keep things in balance, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So
So
what would you
anyway,
do, Eric, if you would change anything? What would you do differently if you went back to? I don't even like this question, but
yeah.
knowing what you know now, how would you have applied those lessons earlier in your career? Would you change anything?
I mean, at times, to the on the leadership style, you mean, in terms of changing that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at times I want to please I wanted to please everybody all
Mm,
the time, and I one of Don even told me this as my mentor. He's like, you know what, you have to say no occasionally. Like I can't take that on, or I'm not going to do that. So I wish I would have done that more earlier in my career and just said no because, um, he also said that if Eric, you only can spin 5 plates in the air, and once you add the 6 or 7, everything comes crashing down. And he
yeah.
wasn't wrong. So I think that's
Yeah.
that's something, and it's probably a personality trait too. I'm a pleaser and want people to work together and quote unquote be happy with what's going on. So that's probably the only thing I would really focus in on.
Yeah. How about a common myth about being how easy it is to be president and CEO that you'd be willing to dispel? Because it's just eating
Yeah,
bonbons and watching TV, right?
yeah, right. Well, the thing is that my daughter, I think she goes, "What do you do all day?" That's what she said. And she's getting her MBA from the University of Minnesota. I'm like, And like Julia, it kind of like it's all across the board. I mean, there's obviously things that I focus on that need to be focused on, but it could be anything from a personnel matter that needs to be handled to, we got to go see a major donor on a particular piece, or we're doing strategic planning. So there's just a lot of different facets to the job that comes into play on a day-to-day basis and month-to-month basis. I think the challenge, in my position is, kind of what we talked about just a few minutes ago, is kind of focusing on the priorities of the organization and not following the shiny object that gets, in your way. Because I always say, being a development person, I always tell people in development that report to me like, oh, I want to do development and marketing. And
Right, right.
I'm like, let's not do that,
Yeah,
because the fun thing is the marketing part. The difficult thing is the development part.
that's
So,
right.
so the shiny object for me could be like, how do we rebrand ourselves? How do we do marketing better? And not focusing on some of the things that can actually move the needle in a faster way. I'm not saying marketing's not important. I'm just saying it's sometimes hard to quantify and qualify.
Right. It's one of our, not a hot button, but one of the most interesting things that, like there's days when I go look back, I'm like, oh, I should have just gone into marketing
Right.
because I can just say things and
Right.
unless you can prove it, right? But
Right.
it does turn out, especially in in the development world, there's when you're thoughtful about it, like you said, the hard part can be measured and be simple. It's not easier, but it can be simplified
Yeah.
with the targeting and conversation. So
Yeah, there's some metrics behind it that is more foundational that you can look into with development. Marketing, on the other hand, how many click-throughs did you have? I mean, the ultimate like end result is, has someone actually signed up for lessons with the conservatory,
that's
right?
right.
I mean,
That's right. I mean,
that's the
marketing for your development is how much does it cost you for every dollar of money that you're buying? Like
right.
it's, I
Yep.
mean, nonprofit people, to your point about being collegial, lots of times don't want it to be about money, but the reality is, if you can't outraise your marketing spend, you
Right.
can't, you just can't do your mission. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's interesting. The more in your space, focusing people on, we're compelled to do more and more of our mission. Like this kid in New York, there's a 492 million meal annual gap,
Wow.
and they're filling. They're going to do 2 million pounds this year, so that's about 20 million meals. And he's like, we got 472 million more to fund, so
Right.
we need to get
Yeah.
off our butt, right, and go.
Yeah, I mean that
So
equation is gonna, filling that gap is always going to be an issue until it's filled, and that's
right,
going to be the challenge.
right. Just
So,
like, I mean, you guys, your mission's not going to get smaller, right? Like usually, people aren't going to run out of kids that could take
right.
advantage of that, or right. So
Yeah.
what share one of the most recent or most interesting insights or learnings or advice you've gotten in any area over the last, 6 or 12 months?
Yeah, this is a good question. I looked over these questions last night. And I was trying to like think of, someone that has pulled me aside, or a board member that has given me some good advice. I think, when I look at our board, Hank Herzing, who runs Herzing University, is on our board. He's been board chair, and he's really been my mentor of sorts from how to run the conservatory standpoint, because he was here when it was failing. And I think
Sure.
his advice to me was kind of what we talked about before, which is focus on the priorities that need to be focused on in order to move the organization forward. And I we can go into detail on what those priorities are, but he helped me from that standpoint from day one when I stepped into my job. He was the first person who came over. He lived two doors down. At Where was he? I forget. Yeah, whatever condos, like Lakeside, or I don't know. But anyway, he was two doors down. So it was. I mean, he never overstepped his bounds by coming over like every day. But it
Yeah.
was nice to have him close by if I need him. But he helped me scale the business too. And I know I'm not giving you a specific like
Oh,
thing
that's
that he
good,
told.
man.
I know you're not going to give me a specific thing that he told me, but one of the things is we started to kind of ratchet up our earned and contributed income over the first year, and I was kind of like I said, Hank, I need to figure out how many administrative staff I need now that we're $1 million bigger organization than we were before. And what formula did you use? Because this guy went to Kellogg. He's an engineer by trade, and he's
Yeah.
grown he grew his business, Herzing, across Canada and the United States. He goes, Eric, you just simplify it. He goes, for every that's pretty funny. He goes, for every $250,000 that you increase your budget by on the earned income side, he goes,
Hmm.
add a staff person in order to manage whatever area
Sure.
that's growing. And it's actually worked out pretty nicely. I mean, he wasn't wrong. And the other thing that he got me, Mike, I
He
mean,
wasn't wrong.
he
What a
wasn't wrong.
surprise.
Yeah. But the other thing that was nice about it was, if I had any pushback from internal staff or faculty or board members, I'd be just like, listen, I had a conversation with Hank Kersing, who runs a multi-million-dollar business. And this is this is how we determine this. So I didn't really have much pushback, but it's nice to have
Yeah.
that in your corner. So I
Yeah.
think that was probably the biggest thing that's helped us moving forward, or me
Yeah.
at least.
I think simplification and rules of thumb make everything easier.
Right.
And like sometimes it's mind-boggling the amount of work somebody will put into something to avoid just doing the easy version of it, like
Right. Or just like raising their hand and saying, "Hey, I need more help."
right,
And you never know that sometimes you don't know that in this seat, kind of what's going on the ground, because people aren't sharing that information very readily. So,
right.
um, so yeah, I think that was probably the best, at least out of the box piece of advice that I got was from Hank.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times the CEO, president, owner role doesn't have a chance, like because that role is so deeply into focusing on the strategy of the business. It's the forest through the trees
Right.
standpoint, right?
Yeah.
And it was one of the things that was valuable to me when I had a regular job was my coach was David Herdlinger. He always, like every other week, he's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I'm like,
Right. Right. Yeah. That's
and
a
he
great
look,
question, right?
and he's just like, "That sounds like you're chopping down a tree. Right? You're
Right.
supposed to be like looking at how the forest is, And I'm like, "Oh, shoot. What
Yeah.
how about
That's a good
something?
point.
How
Sorry.
about something you want to learn outside of work? Anything you're working on there?"
That's like my own personal fun thing, or
Don't look so surprised, Eric.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm trying to think of what I've been doing outside of work that's interesting. I've been reading quite a bit. I like, I try to, my master's degree is in leadership, and
Nice.
yeah, and so I try to read as many books on that and try to get different viewpoints on it. And I think books on leadership are are interesting. Sometimes it's not easy to put like those in practice, but I feel like when you're reading, you just are sponging up information that might be relevant at some point that you can draw upon.
Sure.
Because not everything is like doesn't fit perfectly in the equation. So I've been doing that, and I'm trying to learn chess. And then
Really? That's cool.
yeah, I'm not very good at it. I keep playing the computer at the beginner's level, and I can only get into like 20 minutes, and then I'm done. But I haven't really read up on it, and I haven't done my homework on it. I'm just trying to teach myself. And then I we just remodeled our kitchen, so we have this like brand new wonderful stove, and I have never cooked in 31 years, so I'm learning how to cook. So, and my wife is very grateful, but I have been disastrous. I mean, like just horrific, Mike. I mean, like stuff that I made wasn't edible. It was so salty or or just over seasoned. And I'm watching these like cooking shows. I don't know if you're into cooking, but you watch Gordon Ramsay's like, season, and I'm taking it too like far.
Yeah. Quarter of a cup of salt later, you're like, oh, well,
Yeah,
instead of quarter of a cup.
exactly. So, but I'm getting better. So that's good.
I mean, the
Uh,
thing that as humans, we as we go through life, we decide we should only try something when we're good at it. And
right.
so you can't actually learn. If you're successful, you're not learning
Yeah.
anything about a task when you're doing it. So
I forgot to mention the final thing that I'm focused or kind of working on is I'm writing a story kind of that's related to my growing up in Sherman Park area, and it's been a labor of love because I'm not a really good writer, and I get frustrated when I'm trying to write
yeah,
it, but it's been interesting. So so that's kind of the final thing.
yeah. I mean, I think frustration is the price of learning, but we all got to
Yeah,
pay it. So
yeah, no doubt. So
so
anyway.
finally, what's the next big thing for the Wisconsin Conservatory of Music? It's the next 1 to 3 years, number one growth area or development
Yeah.
challenge or
So we're just finishing up our strategic planning, and I I f- I think back in the day, like these strategic plans would be 5 to 10 years, and they'd have these lengthy tails to them, and
hmm
I've really tried to focus on 3 year iterations of strategic planning because a couple of things, and so I'm kind of diving into the my
Sure.
thought process on strategic planning, but. Um, a couple things like I may not be in the seat in 5 years, or the leadership team may not be in the seat, and then they're given this strategic plan, and the person that comes in or the leadership team may be like, this is garbage, or I'm not following this
Yeah,
road.
sure.
So then it gives you a little more time to try to implement some of the things. So to answer your question, part of our mission is to expand music education to adults and children that don't have access to private lessons here. And private lessons are, they cost money. And, we want to try to, level the playing field to allow all kids and even adults that can't afford to necessarily pay full tuition here to have that opportunity. So we really want to expand our financial aid bucket, and then we've done some of that over the years. We went from like 50,000 to a $500,000, and I mean these are
Big
not.
jump.
Yeah, I mean it's a big change for an organization our size. I mean you go to Marquette or UWM, that's
Right.
just peanuts, but for us it's a big deal. So the challenge is to increase that bucket of money, and the real challenge, Mike, is kind of extrapolating that over a period of time, because I'll just use the example. Let's say we have 100 kids that want music lessons, and we want to provide financial aid. Well, the matriculation across 10 years, that might cost $100,000, but when you get to cross 10 years, you're adding 100. I mean, retention rates are about 80%. So,
Yep.
slap off 20, but you keep adding it up over years. It's not $100,000. It's like, $7 million or
Right.
what have you that you need to make it work. So, there's just such a clamoring for music in this town, and we have to be able to react to that. The other piece of the puzzle is to try to look at what the conservatory would look like outside of Milwaukee. So we're just in very, very early stages of, what would the conservatory look in Madison? Madison doesn't have a community music school of sorts. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
and they're the second largest city. So how do we get into that market and do that? And our our arm stretches out across 5 counties, but we're not like, these are schools that we're working with. These aren't rented facilities that we're providing music to the community. So we just got to figure out how to run that business model, and if there's an appetite for it in those markets. Another one would be, Fox Valley. What does that look like? There's one community music school, and it's attached to Lawrence, but it's small,
Yeah.
and it's funded through, the university, so they don't really have to do kind of I mean, they have to do some fundraising, but it's not, they can always just go to Lawrence and say, help.
Sure.
So I just think there's a lot of opportunities to expand our reach and make that known. The juxtaposition of that is, Milwaukee has so many needs on the music education side of the house that I could see some supporters or people that are invested in the conservatory saying, take care of your own backyard first and
Right.
then and look at it.
Right.
So we got to really look at what the because that's all earned income when we go outside of Milwaukee. Got to look at kind of the business model and see if those cost centers actually will drive revenue into the conservatory. So
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, those
Well,
are kind of the two bigger things on the plate.
yeah. Well, if you want to hold on a minute after we're done, I'll give you a reverse question to kind of noodle on that.
Yeah.
But for now, Eric Tillich, President and CEO of the Wisconsin Conservatory of Music, it's been a blast chatting with you.
Yeah. Thanks.
So thank you for being on the show today.
Yeah. Thanks so much.